We're back, everyone, on a Thursday night. Open Line. Yes, it is not a rerun. We are live tonight, March 19th, so we'd love to hear from you at 737+ as we talk with Chris Sanders, the Executive Director of the Tennessee Equality Project, and talking about what is called, what your group has labeled the slate of hate.
Yep.
Which is anti-LGBT bills on the legislative agenda, at least for now. Obviously, as we talked about at the top of this broadcast, things are changing with the coronavirus and what the legislature is doing, and maybe going into recess here for a brief period of time. But obviously your group and others supporters are still watching these very, very carefully. The people who draft some of these,
sure.
I see you've brought along the Revised English Bible with you. And you have that for a reason, because I know, as we've talked about these issues in the past, that a lot of what do you say to a lawmaker who comes from an extremely conservative rural district, and that lawmaker, man or woman, says to you, Chris, or to your lobbyist, I am simply voting and maybe presenting bills or supporting bills because that is what the majority of my constituents sent me here to do. How do you respond to that and try to persuade people in those districts who may be very Christian and very conservative, who want to apply those principles legislatively?
Yeah. Well, I have a Master of Divinity, and I'm from Vanderbilt, and I'm not afraid of those discussions.
Right.
What I always come back to, though, is that because we can differ on things we might talk about in a Sunday school class, maybe it's best not to use those as the basis of our public policy. There are forums where we can disagree constructively about that and talk about that, but why use that as a punitive basis against a group of people in our society? Additionally, I think what we've done and are probably going to do again is develop a list of clergy around the state who oppose these bills, showing that there's another way to look at the relationship between religion and justice for these groups of people who have been picked on in our society. So those sorts of things help. But the thing I think that helps the most is when people from the district who may be of a religious persuasion or not religious at all, come and visit and say, this is not really what we've sent you up here to do.
Yeah.
And this is my story of, my transgender nephew or my bisexual sister or whatever. Those sorts of things can move people. They don't always in every case. We're still a very socially conservative state on the whole. But people are realizing that they have family and friends who are members of the LGBTQ community. And that does help them go back to the text and say, did it really mean that? Did it really mean I was supposed to pass laws against a group of people?
You used the word punitive, and we were talking about this in the break. Right. Some of these, and I heard you use the word draconian.
Yep.
I mean, we're talking about original draft, original text, which, we would hope, obviously goes through committees and changes, many changes. But when you see the original, some of these original bills are very punitive in different ways. Tell us about that.
I'll give you a few examples.
Yes.
There's a bill that would have affected public libraries in our state. And it said, we're going to establish a parent board that gets elected for every public library system in the state. And librarians who are in violation would be subject to fines or imprisonment.
In violation of what?
Whatever the parent board says with respect to content.
So restricting free speech content?
And programming.
Burning books almost? I mean, I don't want to say that, but
close, yes. And what the object of this was, in Putnam County, Cookeville, there were some pride displays, and there was Drag Queen Story Hour. And this bill was aimed at both of those sorts of things. These are voluntary events. Absolutely. And for years, people have gone in costume and read to children in libraries. It happened when I was a kid. I'm not going to say we had drag queens, but we had people in all kinds of costumes at our library reading to us. And it's been part of programming for libraries for a long time in this country. But it was also taking aim at the Pride display during the month of June. And, you know, they were willing to jail librarians for violations. That's how serious they were. Here's another one. There is a medical protocol that is widely agreed on for transgender youth. A legislator filed a bill to try to upend that and would have labeled physicians who did otherwise child abusers. It opened that section of the code. Did the bill go before the Health Committee? No, it went before the Criminal Justice Subcommittee in our legislature. Medical care going through a Criminal Justice Subcommittee. Yes, I'm a bit outraged about that. But that's the level of the penalty.
What's the status?
That bill is not currently moving, thankfully.
Okay.
But that's how these bills were filed, with these extreme penalties.
How confident do you feel in Governor Lee's stance? He is a conservative, but he has also shown some compassion on some issues, like the resettlement of refugees, if some of these bills were to get to his desk.
Well, as many know, the governor in Tennessee, and not just Governor Lee, any governor, has a weak veto power. It only takes 50% plus one of both chambers to override a veto, so it's not a strong veto. So we don't put all our eggs in his basket.
Right.
Sometimes governors lobby against these bills. For example, Governor Haslam worked against a lot of anti-LGBTQ bills. He signed a few, but he worked against more than he signed. We've not yet quite seen that same level from Governor Lee on the front end on these bills. One hopes that we will, but we're putting most of our work in trying to move the legislators not to go forward with them. Right.
737 plus if you would like to call in. Again, Chris Sanders is here, Executive Director of the Tennessee Equality Project. You know, this issue's not been in the headlines, obviously, at least for a month because of the tornadoes and the coronavirus pandemic, but there are a number of bills that affect all sorts of people here in the state of Tennessee that are being considered right now in the state legislature, and that's why we are talking about these tonight. So we'd love to get your opinion at 737 plus. Do these bills come up every session, or tell me about the frequency?
That's a great question.
You know, is it more or less as the
this
legislative
year,
membership changes?
Yeah, this year there were more than we've seen in a while. We had about 6 big ones last year, and this year we've got 11 that we're really working. And there are others that have potential. You know, when you file a bill, sometimes a bill is filed in what the legislator hopes is the final form. And sometimes they file what is known as a caption bill. We don't quite know what we want this bill to look like, so we'll put a placeholder down and fill it in later with an amendment. Currently, we're dealing with about 11 bills. Not all of them are moving. Some of them are held over from last year. A bit of quick inside baseball. Tennessee has a 2-year legislative session, so bills filed in the first year carry over to the second year. So we've got some carryovers, and you can file new bills in the second year. So we've got some new bills. This is the most I've seen in a long time. So would it be fair to say it's getting worse? Maybe. I mean, remember the first bill that was passed in the legislature this year was the adoption discrimination bill, period. The first bill.
Did that surprise you?
We knew it could come up very early. I was a little bit surprised that was the first one they dealt with. I think it was the only one on the calendar in the Senate that day.
Why do you think it's because conservatives have grown their base? They now have a supermajority, Republicans anyway, and they just feel emboldened that they're going to move forward with the social issues.
For us, it's not strictly a partisan thing. The bills do tend to originate with Republicans, but a number of Republicans in the Senate refuse to vote for the bill.
Yeah.
And in fact, Senator Dickerson, who is my state senator, spoke and voted against the bill. So, yes, the bills are originating mainly with Republicans, and I think that's absolutely fair to note. For us, we're going to work on trying to change your mind and heart regardless of what your political party is. So I think they are feeling empowered to a degree. I think it's the influence of the vice president in our country. I don't think the president focuses on our issues, but he allows the vice president to encourage all these groups. And I think a lot of it comes from those groups that are around the vice president. I really do.
We're going to take another break and be back here on Open Line after this.